Are you happy with the way things have gone at Bladnoch? It's been what, about 5 years now since you acquired the place?
It's been 5 and a bit years, Mark, and happy is a sort of vexed word, I think, when it comes to owning a whiskey distillery. In some ways, I'm extremely happy, and in other ways, it's been a pretty tough little journey to date. I think that first of all, the asset itself, Bladnoch's just a wonderful piece of history and something I'm just thrilled and honoured to own. So not a day have I regretted that decision. I think it was absolutely the right decision. I don't know if you've been to Bladnoch, but 203 years old with the beautiful river running right through the middle and bluestone buildings, and there was really nothing that you couldn't fall in love with when it came to the distillery itself and to the whiskies and to the history of the place. I guess the challenges that I probably underestimated were just the level of capital intensity that would be required to get that distillery back up and running, the time it would take to reintroduce Bladnoch single malts back onto some world markets and therefore generate some revenue to keep the place going, and I think lastly just the time it would take to kind of build out a team. I'm based in Melbourne. It's difficult at the best of times, let alone with coronavirus and haven't been able to go back to Bladnoch for a year. But so to have and really it's my sole focus when it comes to business. So it's a significant commitment for me. It's not some kind of thing I'm doing as a little hobby or a pastime. So to not be able to go there and to be sort of fully reliant on a team on the other side of the world was a really big, I suppose, a big bridge to cross. I think on all those things, we've just made great progress, and really in the last year or two have rounded out the team to a place where I feel just incredibly comfortable, empowering them to do their job and to run that distillery to the best of its capabilities.
And you have to do that from 10,000 miles away because of the coronavirus, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, look, my style is not to be a micromanager at the best of times. I think you employ or you bring on board the best people you can, and then you really have to let people get on and do their own work. And sure, if things don't work out, then you've got an issue and you've got conversations to have. But generally, I'm very much of the view of let people get on and do their own work. And certainly with Nick Savage, who joined last year, and with a number of the other key team, and couple of my key people here in Melbourne have been with me for 2-3 businesses, so they really know how I work, and we've got a very, very sort of, we're in sync when it comes to how we communicate and what's expected of each other. And as I said, I think the distance at the start, again, was one of the things I did underestimate. I thought, well, with all the tech and all that, how hard can it be? It can actually be pretty hard, because it's not just the distance. You're down in the remote part of Scotland. Broadband and all that sort of stuff is not that great. So doing things like Zoom calls, especially with teams, if you've got 4 or 5 people that end and we've got 4 or 5 this end, and you're all kind of ringing in from everywhere, it is quite tricky. And I won't say that it hasn't been a challenge. It has been a real challenge, but we've certainly got better at it. And as I said, I think as we grow and mature as a team, then it's become less of a challenge.
How hard was it for you to replace Ian Macmillan, who basically got you off the ground as your lead person in Scotland in the early days of rebuilding the place, and has now moved on about it a couple of years ago? And how hard was it to replace him? And I know Nick Savage has done a good work for you, but how hard was it to replace Ian?
Yeah, Ian was so actually how we found Ian. So I had a fellow by the name of Gavin Hewitt sitting on my advisory board, and Gavin had run the SWA for many years, and just an incredible gentleman, someone that I get on very well with and have a lot of time for. And he basically helped me to find Ian in the first place back in 2015. And Ian was the absolute perfect person for that role at the start. I think we were walking into something that, needed to be rebuilt basically from scratch. And it's funny, when I went into Bladnoch and went in through that process, which was a competitive process to buy it, the people that were selling it were, oh, look, all the distillery is in perfect working order. And of course, I've come out of the food industry, and I mean, I was smart enough to know not to believe everything they said, but I was kind of hoping that at least some of it might be working. I think the reality is we really needed a new distillery, and we were able to use a lot of the infrastructure and, of course, the warehouses and the site, but the stills and all the electricals and all the piping and everything that goes along with it had to be replaced. So Ian, and with his incredible relationship with the Forsyth family, was able to, first of all, get us to the front of a pretty long list of work that, of distilleries waiting to be built, and ran an incredible operation for us from start to finish with Richard Forsyth, that delivered that plant in kind of 12 or 15 months on time and on budget, which I thought was extraordinary. I mean, I've built a couple of manufacturing plants in the past, and a dairy plant, sort of ironically, is not that dissimilar to a whiskey plant. Lots of pipes and lots of tanks and lots of moving parts. And when I built the yogurt plant in 2011, it went over budget by probably 50% and over time by probably 12 months. So to be able to do that, to be able to deliver Bladnoch, as I said, on time and on budget, was a great achievement. So losing Ian was a really big loss, and I think, like with all these things, came as a bit of a shock, although I knew that he had other things in his mind, and probably he felt that his best value to Bladnoch had already been delivered in terms of getting it going again, helping us to re-establish ourselves. And I think he said, quite honestly from the start, I'm not that much of the guy to run an established operation day in, day out. I like the excitement of getting it going again, being involved with new ventures. And so, we made the mutual decision for him to kind of, go to other pastures, which he's thoroughly enjoying now. And so obviously we went to the market. We went to a top recruiter in Scotland. And I've got to say I was really quite blown away by the quality of candidates that I got the opportunity to speak with. And I can only put that down to the fact that probably, a number of kind of top master distillers were excited by the opportunity to work for a small privately owned business. I think that was probably the thing. Obviously, as you know, the Scotch industry is so dominated by large corporates who have their strengths and I think have got a lot of great things going for them as employers. But I think that sometimes, if people are looking for a change, then the opportunity to work for what is basically a family business was why we got some really, really great people to talk to. And I felt Nick was the right person for a number of reasons, but I thought I liked, kind of a lot of things. I liked the profile in terms of sort of age, experience, his background. He'd spent time in Australia. He'd studied here. He played sport at a very high level. He'd come out of Macallan, which I thought was a great kind of brand learning for Bladnoch. So there were a lot of things that him and I just really got on well from the first time we met. So it's been a great appointment.
You've had the initial 3 releases of the Bladnoch single malts so far. When are we going to start to see more Bladnoch hit the market?
Oh, that's interesting you say that. That's obviously shows the difference between what we've been able to get through to the US versus probably Australia and the UK and Germany and a few of the other markets. We've probably released another 10 or 12 products since those first 3. And I must say, so initially, as you said, we released Samsara, Adela and Talia. Samsara being the no age statement, probably still my favourite Bladnoch, which that was Ian's first release, Adela, the 15-year-old, and Talia being the 25-year-old at that time. There's been multiple expressions of Talia from 26 to 27 to 25, different finishes and different cask varieties. And there's been a lot of single cask expressions that we've done. We've also done a 10-year-old. We've done an 11-year-old. We've just launched a 14-year-old. There's been an enormous amount of, I guess, innovation in a way. It's kind of, as you know, it's not easy to innovate with aged whiskies. You've got what's been laid down, and it's not that easy to tweak. But we've been doing a lot with, I think one thing we've learned about Bladnoch is we've got quite a lot of whiskey, aged whiskey, in small, little, we've got a 2001, we've got a 2007, we've got a 2003, we've got various little parcels. And, we can do something creative with each of those parcels, and we can release 400 cases. We can release 600 cases. We're not hamstrung in having to do very long runs and obviously with a blend completely different. But so that's something I think we've become a lot better at is doing, limited releases. And of course, what I've seen from that is that our customer really, really loves that. It gets a lot of excitement because people, I think, gradually sort of inherently attracted to something that is, it's finite by nature. If there's only 200 cases of it and there's 50 cases going to Germany and 50 cases coming to Australia, then of course that becomes a pretty sought after commodity. So we've found that that's something that consumers love. They love to know that this is one of, whatever it is, 500 bottles or whatever. So that's, I think that's been a great learning for us and a great evolution. And I hope we can catch that up and have some more of those products in the US soon, because we're obviously pretty behind in what we offer in the US.
How important is the US going to be as a market for you going forward?
It's interesting, Mark. Again, I did a lot of work with Gavin and with a guy named Mike Brennan, who used to be the treasurer for Bacardi, and lots of guys. I sort of had an advisory board set up before I started and did a real deep dive into the whiskey industry. I mean, I knew what I knew, which was a lifelong passion for whiskey, and I've obviously got a lot of business experience, but there's still a lot which you don't know. And so I spent a lot of time learning and kind of identified the US as really the key market, the number one market by value, if not by volume, and important for us in so many ways. The truth is we found the US really, really tough. So we launched there 6 months. We launched in Australia first because I had very strong relationships with the major retailers through my past business. And it's been a great relationship down here with Dan Murphy's in particular. But the US was the next, and we really found it just extraordinarily difficult. I mean, as you know, of course, with the 3-tier system, and then with your importer, with your distributor, with the retailer, each wanting a really sort of significant margin. And then what we found, I think, at the start was there was kind of, the importer saying, well, now you need, we do, we bring the product in, we handle the logistics, but you need your own team, and the distributor saying, well, you need your sort of, there was not enough margin to make all that happen. We were kind of going, wow, this is a real, we're going to lose $10 for every bottle we sell. This is going to be a really tough market. And then, of course, when you get into the nuances of, it's kind of naive to think of the US as one market. California and New York, as an example, are so different to one another, Florida and Texas compared to Illinois. So we've learned a lot, and we've now got, I think, after 4 years, a model that works. So we're using a company called Park Street Imports down in Florida, who, as you would know, is more like just a logistics provider, and does so for a reasonable fee, and allows us to therefore concentrate on our relationships with the retailers. And our distribution partner has become like a joint venture partner for us. So we share in the upside, which I'm happy to do, but it sort of lowers our downside risk. So we've now started to get a really sort of nice run on in the US. We've had 6 or 12 months of sort of good, significant, consistent sales. We're starting to get good listings. We're in Total Wine. We're in Bevmo. We've got some nice, good, solid retailers. We're about to go into Costco. We're doing an exclusive with them. And so finally, after a lot of hard work, I can say the US, I would say within the next year or two, will become our sort of top 3 or 4 market, which is great because, as I said, we always knew how important it was, but we completely underestimated how tough it is.
In terms of underestimating how tough things are, what lessons did you learn from redeveloping and reopening Bladnoch that the folks that are in the process of doing the same thing with other old distilleries, the Rosebanks, the Broras, the Port Ellens in Scotland, that are taking these historic sites and rebuilding them, what have you learned from that those guys can benefit from?
Sure. Well, I think some of those, I believe, have been bought by or are being redeveloped by pretty established players. I think, I'm not sure, or families. So they probably know their lessons, and I don't know that I can share too much with them. But I think more generally with I think the distillery business in general, with the whiskey business in general, I would just say, look, this is really something you learn in any type of entrepreneurial venture, but it's just amplified in whiskey, is that it's much harder and it's much slower. And really your capital reserves, I came in with a reasonable sort of head of steam from our last business and was able to transact and thought, well, hopefully funds won't be too much of an issue. And pretty soon, funds became an issue because, of course, I had to fund the purchase price of Bladnoch. Then we spent, £5 or £6 million to redo the distillery. And then, of course, that's only to get you to the start line. Then you've got to start to lay down liquid. You're spending €1.5 million on casks every year. You're running an operation. Now we've started the visitor centre and restaurant. We've got probably 30 people at the distillery, so you've got significant overheads. You're trying to launch brands, in our case, Pure Scott and Bladnoch, and they cost a lot of money to launch. You've got a $500,000 marketing budget or something. So suddenly I think, doesn't matter how much background of sort of resources you've come in with, it can catch up with you very, very quickly. And I think you either need to be in a very, very strong position financially yourself, or you need to have a very good, I think if you come in with a network, not too many people do what I did, which was buy, an old distillery or a historic distillery on your own. I've seen a lot of people do it in more like in a group, or put together a sort of consortium or whatever, which I guess lessens the exposure in some ways and gives you access to capital. And of course, if you have access to, if one of the big guys or something is backing you, then of course, again, they have the financial clout and hopefully the patience to help you to get it done. But if you're going to do it on your own, you certainly want to make sure you've got a hell of a lot of runway. I think a lot of patience, and I do think you've got to have a real love for the category because, again, whilst whiskey is a fantastic business, I know you, Mark, you've been doing this a long time. You would know a lot about the category, not just from a product point of view, but from a mechanics point of view. It's a very, very, 90% of distilleries are owned by the corporates. Therefore, there's a lot of M&A activity all the time. And so transactions get done at significant multiples. And so it is a great category to be a part of. And it's an exciting category to be a part of. But if you don't have a love for it, and I think if you don't have a passion for it, I would probably advise to go and do something else, because you've got to have a lot of patience to want to lay down liquid and not think about it again for 10 or 12 years, and I'm pretty sure that if you've come in either with money or it's your first, very hard to do as your first business, but there's probably easier to go and invest in the share market. So I think you've got to, like me, if you get a thrill out of walking through the distillery, into the warehouses, smelling the whiskey, doing the samplings, then you can't really put a price on, the business. Because I go back to Scotland, Sally and I, my wife, we go back there and we stay a week or two. I get such incredible kind of intrinsic rewards from the whole experience of Bladnoch. So yes, we're building a great business, which is now, thank God, making strong returns, and we're building something that's a valuable asset. But I also get all this joy out of being a part of it, out of having rebirthed this distillery. Just the simple act of driving. We stay around Girvan. We drive down through the national park down to Bladnoch. It's just amazing. It's an incredible experience. There's stunning scenery. There's waterfalls. We get there, and as you know, it's just this beautiful location. We've got people there that Bladnoch's much more to them than just a business. It's part of their lives. It's been, kind of the number one employer, biggest thing in the town for for generations. We've got people working in the business centre whose grandfathers were stillmen and that sort of thing, and they've been able to come back from Edinburgh and Glasgow to work for us now. And so that gives us an incredible sense of satisfaction and reward. So it's a very emotionally engaging business. So I would say that if you're looking at it just from the point of view of returns and financial reward, don't do it. But if you're looking at a much more holistic, I couldn't think of a better business to be in. I really couldn't. I love what I'm doing at the moment. It's an absolute honour to be doing what we're doing.
You mentioned the Pure Scott blend. How is that coming along in the market?
Market, of course, blends is a much tougher category. It's it's still by far the biggest volume driver, and I think 80% or higher of all Scotch whisky that's sold is blended whisky. Of course, most of that's sold at a very low price point. Pure Scott's not a low price point. It's a kind of higher price point. It is a quality blend. We spent a lot of time and effort putting that product together. It's been hard. It's been very hard, I will say that. But it's got 2 or 3 markets where it's started to do quite well. And Australia is one of them. Funny enough, Israel is one of them. We've got a very good relationship with a retailer there who is supporting us strongly and is taking quite nice volumes of Pure Scott. And similarly in Moscow, we've got a good relationship with a retail chain, and it's going quite well there. So it's got enough. It's shown enough it's shown enough track record to suggest that it's got a future. I think it'll become a sort of a 10,000 case brand in the next year or two, which is not too bad. It's a platform from which to work with. I think we've just launched a ready-to-drink product, what we call an RTD, down here in Australia. We've done a Pure Scott and tonic and a Pure Scott and smoked cola. Again, they're at the kind of very premium end of the RTD market. The retailers have been extremely positive about the fact that we're providing innovation in a category that's a bit staid. Our flavours and mixing with tonic and mixing with a premium smoked cola. So they've been very well received, and I think it's going to give the brand a bit of a push along in terms of visibility down here in Australia and in any other markets we choose to work in. So it's good. It's as I said, it's totally different when you've got a rare single malt. To some extent, you don't have to sell it because it's got its history, it's got its provenance, and people either like that story and they like that region and that flavour profile, or they don't. Blended whiskey's a lot tougher. But then you'll get other consumers. My wife will only drink Pure Scott. She won't drink any of the Bladnochs and never has. So that there is always going to be a consumer that prefers, that type of product. So, we're happy with it, but it's got some work to do still.
One final question. Have you gotten a chance to go surfing in Scotland yet?
I've been for a swim. So I swam there last year, and it was pretty cold, and that was probably around June. So it's the warmest part of the year. I am committed to going surfing there. Definitely. There's really, really good waves up around Thurso. And so we're planning a surf trip there, hopefully sort of towards the September, October period next year, when it's had a full 3 months of summer and the water's kind of up around 12 degrees or something. So you don't have to wear a dry suit. And I am keen. Ireland as well. I'd love to surf Ireland, but I've definitely got to surf Scotland. So it's on the agenda, and hopefully it comes together next year.
Well, I appreciate your time, David. Continued good luck, and take care of yourself, and we'll talk again soon.
Good on you, Mark. Great having a show.
Take care.
Thanks.